فإننا سنواصل اليوم في هذه الجلسة العلمية الأولى لليوم الثاني من فعاليات مؤتمر نبتة العلمي الأول. إذا فأنا أدعو إلى المنصة رئيس هذه الجلسة بروفيسور مرغني محمد علي، رئيس قسم علم الأمراض كلية نبتة، وأدعو أيضا الدكتورة سلافة سيف الدين منسق برنامج علوم المختبرات الطبية كلية نبتة، وأدعو أيضا الدكتورة منى النصيري نائب أمين الشؤون العلمية كلية نبتة، وأدعو مقدم الورقة الأولى الدكتورة إدريس أحمد فؤاد، وهي الحاصلة على ماجستير المعلوماتية الحيوية من الجامعة الوطنية، فليتفضلوا مشكورين جميعا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. نحن في هذه الأيام نتنسق ذكرى للنبي عليه الصلاة والسلام والاحتفال باختصار المناسبة السعيدة. ونتفضل دكتور إدريس ليقدم الورقة التي هي برنامج وظائف advantage of vaccine from Neva virus for autoimmune.
Good evening, all. Let's go back in time for December 2019. Why world lockdown? We lost a lot of relatives, friends, parents. Because of it, it's new generated virus generation from Corona. It's COVID-19. COVID came from bats. Bats also was a virus named Neva virus. Neva virus and COVID-19, both of them listed on WHO blueprint. On 2018, an emerging disease that may cause an outbreak of the world. Already, COVID-19 may working on Neva virus vaccine, multi-epitope vaccine using immunoinformatic approach. So let us go to see what I'm doing. Okay. First of all, let us know about the transmission cycle of Neva virus. Like I said, it came from bats, especially in Asia. When bats drag on trees, fruits, and so on, when can livestock, animals, and humans touch or eat these fruits or trees, then transmitted the disease of Neva virus that may cause hazard, neurological, and respiratory disease. They are vital at all. So look at me. This is the structure and genome of Neva virus to tell you about where I'm working on it. First of all, I'm tracking the virus from each side. Firstly, from fusion protein, glycoprotein, which is responsible for attachment of the virus. Then also I'm working matrix protein, which mediate macrophage antibody, and nucleocapsid, phosphoprotein, long polymerase, which ribonucleotide. Also I'm working on small proteins like W and P. So until I'm constructing 8 different proteins target all the virus. So I would love to take you with me with my journey about making epitope-based vaccine. First of all, I'm retrieved the sequence from NCBI National Center of Biotechnology Information and UniProt. Then must be to be sure my proteins which I retrieved antigenic, allergenic, non-toxic, so I'm using online software, vaccine, a laptop, vaccine break. Then after it, I used to echo prediction by IEDB. All of them is online softwares. So IEDB is immune epitope database. Then this one, IEDB, this make my sequence pieces of epitope. It's called T cell and B cell epitope that's included in T cell MHC1 and MHC2. Then these pieces, I have it in antigenic, non-toxic, non-allergic, and human homologous. Then must be to contact each other together by linker and add some adjuvant, which called vaccine construction. Then 7th step of it, it's 2D and 3D dimension structure. After I construct my vaccine, must be to predict secondary and tertiary structure, use Swiss model, and so on. So after all last step or 3, stimulation experiment, which called molecular dynamic stimulation, I use it to examine my vaccine, which I constructed, it's active with human or not. So I'm using Calcific online software and also use CIMM to make it. Then final step, put on adaptation and cloning. So I'm proud that my old egg vaccine is already cloning with my vector BT28A. So this is the software already I told you about it. Then this is my result. This is 3D structure of my vaccine which I constructed. This is in PDP format. So I'll give you my result about vaccine constructability. Like you see here, I'm showing that my vaccine is antigenic, non-allergic, non-toxic, and soluble over expression. So my vaccine, all 8 vaccine, it's perfect until this step, it's called disulfide bond engineering, which make it if my vaccine gonna be stable in body or not. So here, like you see, I excluded L vaccine, which is not stable on human body. So after this step, L, there is no L after it. So here docking, I docked all my vaccine with 3 different type. I docked with HALA molecule, toll-like receptor 1 and toll-like receptor 3, which here called 3W3M. It's perfect result I get it from it. So I'm docked by using software Clues Pro and Hawa Dock. All my vaccine, it's perfect, and like you see here, it's make immunity stimulation. All cytokines, it's approved. So, like you see, all my 7 vaccines was already excluded from docking. So, this is final step codon adaptation and in silico cloning. CAA, which is codon adaptation index, if it's above than 0.5, that's make good quality of vaccine. Like you see, all my vaccine have a good quality and it's rich of G and C content. So, conclusion, all my 7 vaccine is promising novel vaccine of Nipah virus. Working in silico already, this is all experiment in silico using bioinformatic approach. So, analysis confirmed, all my analysis confirms that pre-trial of 7 vaccine is approved and must be go to next step. It's still our vivo, our in-lab trial. So, also I have a recommendation to use iMods tool, which in work molecular dynamic stimulation, usually work on it because of I had license issue. So it's gonna give us perfect result. So this is my acknowledgement. I would really love first to thank Dr. Al-Hardad, Allah yarhamu. He's helped me a lot And firstly, Dr. Sofia, she's my supervisor in Nadia Center, Innovation Center, which helped me a lot. For sure, Dr. Sarah Ahmed Hasabullah, which give me all support all time. And Dr. Safabil, but she's not here today. Would like to thank also Dr. Sabir because he's given me a lot of support with license, with everything. Thank you, Prof.
شكرا دكتورة إدريس. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الحضور الكريم، السادة العلماء، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. مرحبا بكم كلكم طبعا باختلاف المسميات والألقاب في هذا الجمع العظيم. أحب أشكر القائمين على أمر هذا المؤتمر، طبعا على رأسهم بروفيسور زبير بشرقاها، ربان السفينة، ومعلم الأديان، ومعلمنا كلنا طبعا على إتاحته الفرصة لنا كلنا نكون جزء من هذا الحدث العظيم. أيضا أشكر كل المنظمين، وتحية خاصة ومن القلب وحارة جدا لطلابنا الأعزاء. اللي هم يعني طلعوا المؤتمر بالصوره المنظمه الويل اورجنايز والاوتستاندينج اللي احنا شايفينها عليه، وحقيقه يعني هي نبته حديثه عمرا ولكن اصيله فكرا ومبدأ رؤيه، وعشان كده احنا بدنا نعمل استمراريه لتتبوأ مقعد متميز ومتقدم بين المؤسسات التعليميه القوميه والاقليميه والعالميه. الآن أدعو مقدم الورقة الثانية دكتور مصعب حسين مصطفى، عضو هيئة تدريس قسم العظام بجامعة الخرطوم، فليتفضل المنصب. الورقة بعنوان usefulness of MRI findings in differentiating between septic arthritis and transient synovitis of hip joint in children, systematic review and meta-analysis.
How are you? Good afternoon. First of all, I would like the science and the college of this great opportunity, and also deep science for the mass of this amazing work. I hope this will take as a new era of this course of field and help the junior and the junior researchers in their journey. First of all, before I start my presentation, I would like to tell you a story. When I was a house officer in the pediatric shift, a child came to us complaining of severe right neck. We didn't know what happened with the child. All the complaint was just pain and joint fever. We asked him some questions, we examined him, but we also didn't find anything. After that, we discussed this issue with our consultant. He says that it may be transient arthritis, maybe septic arthritis, maybe trauma, maybe oncologist. So there is a wide range of differential diagnosis. After that, we started to exclude some diseases. And we reached out and ruled out this child may have either transient and what's called septic arthritis. So we started to search in the literature on how to differentiate between these two conditions because they share the same clinical presentation. And we have to support our clinical sense by doing the investigations. So the question was, what is the appropriate investigation in this issue, in that investigation? So at that point in time, I came idea with this researchers to conclude that or to know that what is the role of radiology differentiate between septic arthritis and transverse arthritis. Okay, as all of you know that meta-analysis ranks the first in evidence-based medicine, and most of guidelines come from meta-analysis. That's why it ranks the first in evidence-based medicine. Okay, septic arthritis is a very dangerous disease. It will lead to further devastating complications. It may destroy the joint, it may cause soft tissue infections and bone infections, it may even cause the child disease. That's why it's very important to diagnose the septic arthritis as early as possible. Also, it's very important to differentiate between transverse arthritis because, as I mentioned, they share the same clinical features. In the past years, there is a scientist called Kocher. He discovered a clinical prediction rule, very simple clinical prediction rule, to help with this dilemma. Yeah, this clinical prediction rule is very helpful, especially in the country with low resources like ours. But this clinical prediction rule, however, was found to be with low predictive value. It may over-diagnose or under-diagnose patients with septic arthritis. And as all of you know, the inappropriate use of antibiotics may cause antibiotic resistance. So we are between two complications. Either diagnose the patient falsely as septic arthritis, or so as transverse arthritis, and give him antibiotic, or needs to diagnose septic arthritis, and that will lead to further devastating complications. So as I mentioned, I started to search about the role of radiology in this dilemma. We focus on MRI because MRI was found to be most sensitive in general musculoskeletal infections. That is why we spot the right on this imaging modality. In a moment, I will discuss other modalities and why we focus on MRI. Sorry for this inconvenience. Continue what we have done. What we have done. As I mentioned, this is meta-analysis. So we collect studies that share the same criteria and we analyze them collectively. We do systematic research in different databases like PubMed, Google Scholar, Science Library, and we found that there is more than 600 studies. This is about this topic. After screening these studies by reading the abstract and full article, we include about 5 studies in our meta-analysis. These 5 studies talk about the same topic. Each study has 2 groups, group of septic arthritis and group of transient arthritis. And we search about the MRI findings that could help in this. Okay, after that, we assess the quality of these studies because, as I mentioned, meta-analysis. If you did meta-analysis in a really good way with really accurate methodology, this would help. Okay, as media, the most common patients in these studies have transient arthritis, about 120 patients, and 78 patients have septic arthritis. This is because transient arthritis is the most common cause cause of hip pain in children. That's why the number of patients is more than the number of septic arthritis. Okay, starting with our results. As I mentioned, we focus on MRI findings. If you are a radiologist, what signs and what imaging, radiological signs that could help you in diagnosing this septic arthritis or transverse sinusitis? We focus on 4 radiological imaging, which was synovial enhancement. Synovial membrane is the membrane that found inside the joint between the cartilage, and the soft tissue around the joint, and the femoral head, and the palmar, which is the structure that surrounds the joint. We focus on what's the signal intensity and what the radiological signs that we could help us in diagnosis if this child has septic or transverse sinusitis. As I mentioned, septic arthritis is a very serious disease. On the other hand, transverse sinusitis is a very mild disease, self-limiting disease, would go away without any further complications. Okay. Starting with the synovial enhancement. Enhancement means a change in synovial signal intensity before and after giving the patient a contrast. We found that the sensitivity of this change is about 94%. This means if you find a child and you get an MRI and find synovial enhancement, there is a chance of 94% this child will have septic arthritis. On the other hand, the pool specificity was 60%. Pool sensitivity means after we analyze these studies together. These are studies that we include them in this meta-analysis. About the soft tissue change, it has less sensitivity than the synovial enhancement is about 75%, and specificity about 69%. Coming to the pulmonary change, pulmonary change has the most specific radiological signs, about 99.9%, almost 100%. What this means? This means if you are a radiologist and the orthopedic surgeon order MRI for hip joint for this child, and you find that there is pulmonary change in the hip, that means 100% the child has septic arthritis, and this prevent us from the risk that we could put the child when we do joint aspiration, because introducing a needle inside the joint may put the child in the risk of getting septic arthritis. This child may not have septic arthritis, but if we introduce a needle, we could introduce bacteria from the skin inside the joint.
Dr. Musa, I'm sorry, there are 2 minutes left.
And this is really important, really helpful in our practice. As I mentioned earlier, the most sensitive sign was synovial enhancement, and this could be explained by the fact that the blood supply of the joint comes through the synovial membrane. So the synovial membrane is Anthony holds the window that the blood comes through the joint. And the blood, as we all know, the main source of septic arthritis is bacteria that coming through the blood. So the bacteria comes through the synovial membrane. It is the first place that bacteria comes through. That's why synovial enhancement is very sensitive, and it's the earliest signs to be detected in MRI. On the other hand, the pulmonary change was more specific because there is infected and septic synovial fluid inside the joint. And there is destructive enzymes that cause destruction to the pulmonary around the joint. As I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of studies that talk about this topic regarding the importance of radiology in general. There is a lot of studies talking about the importance of ultrasound. But ultrasound is not helpful in detecting of skeletal infections. That's why we recommend the use of MRI in any patients suspected to have septic arthritis. I know that MRI is not available in our country, and it costs a lot of money. Not talking about spelling is really helpful. It really could help us in early diagnosis and early management. So I come to the end of my. If anyone has a question, I will be happy to answer it. If anyone is interested in feelings of article, you can scan this code and you find the article in the link of your judge.
شكرا دكتور مصعب. الان كنا نجاهد الدكتوره من النسير في تقديم الورقه الثالثه.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أيها الأخ الكريم، سعيدين بالتواجد معكم، ويسرني أكثر إني أقدم لنا خريجة الكلية الدكتور زينة إسماعيل عثمان. تقديم ورقتها بعنوان Aortic Stenosis. What do we know and when do we intervene?
السلام عليكم. أنا زينة إسماعيل. I'm going to be presenting aortic stenosis. This is a review article I published a few years ago. The objectives of this review article was to understand what aortic stenosis is, what's the investigations that can be made, the pathophysiology behind this condition, and any recent interventions that are going to be made. So before we talk about aortic stenosis, just a quick general overview to help us with the understanding of what aortic stenosis is. We have 4 valves in the heart. We're going to be focusing on the aortic valve, which connects between the aorta. Blood becomes circulated over the entire body. So when we talk about stenosis, there's something that's blocking the flow to the entire body. So you can only imagine the complications that can be found. So as we keep this general knowledge in mind, we can get started. So by definition, aortic stenosis is a condition in which there's continuous fibrosis, calcification, as well as thickening of the valve. This will eventually impede the amount of blood flow that is being circulated all over the body because there is a narrowing in the valve that is sending the blood supply to the entire system. Furthermore, recent studies have been able to determine that aortic stenosis affects older age groups, and as we all know, all age groups are more of risk of developing complications due to the risk of comorbidities and possible diseases they already have. What are the 3 most major causes of aortic stenosis? Aortic stenosis is divided into 3 major causes. The first one we have is degenerative or calcific aortic stenosis, which is basically the deposition of calcium among the leaflets, which is a tricuspid valve. The aorta is a tricuspid valve. There's calcium being deposited all over the 3 leaflets. Keeping in mind that during the blood flow during the system, there's already calcium in the blood. So this older age group, there's actually calcium being deposited in the valve as the blood is being circulated. The second cause is rheumatic heart disease, which was actually the first cause of aortic stenosis because it was one of the common diseases back in the day. Now it's only affecting developing countries, and there's treatment regimens that are available. Back then, there was not enough interventions that were being made, so it was actually the first cause. Lastly, we have congenital. Congenital aortic stenosis is when the baby actually presents with it at birth, and it's a bicuspid valve instead of a tricuspid. So if you were to narrow this down, the first common cause is calcific, being the cause of aortic stenosis. Keeping in mind that this is a similar presentation to atherosclerosis, since the risk factors are all similar: old age group, hypertension, and male sex. So this is why degenerative is now considered the first cause of aortic stenosis. Pathology, it's organized into 2 groups: the initiation phase and then the problem. Initiation phase is when there's pro-inflammatory cytokines, there's hyperlipidemia, and there's lipid deposition basically. This is the initiation phase. When we move on to the propagation stage, this is when there's osteoblast-like cells that deposit the calcium all over the body. How do we diagnose aortic stenosis? Now, the diagnosis of calcific aortic stenosis is usually suspected during the presence of a systolic ejection murmur. To listen to the aorta, it's in this second peristernal right intercostal space. You can clearly listen to it there. They usually have a systolic ejection murmur. This is called the crescendo murmur. This is basically due to the fact that there's a block and then there's a rigidity all over the valve. This is why they present with the systolic ejection murmur. A side note to keep in mind, a murmur does not indicate the severity of the condition. So even if it's clearly heard, that does not necessarily mean that this is an advanced stage of aortic stenosis. In addition to that, there's a leaking systolic murmur, and there's a single second heart sound. There's usually a splitting, and this is due to the valve being rigid and trying to relax and not being able to do so correctly. Lastly, there's the cooing murmur. This is not very common. It's more of a musical sound like in the murmur. There's also a clinical presentation. So the carotid output, which you can all check yours over here, theirs is very low. It's slow rising, and if you basically also take to check for the systolic ejection murmur, it will radiate up until the carotids. Okay, so how will we assess the severity of someone with aortic stenosis? Generally, for cardiac conditions, we use the ECG, echocardiography, and Doppler studies. The very recent intervention, and there's also cardiac catheterization, of course. Doppler studies, recent studies have been showing that it's actually more accurate for the diagnosis of aortic stenosis, which is the handheld echocardiography, and it's currently being used instead of the cardiac catheterization to manage the prognosis and to even diagnose patients with aortic stenosis. HHD, which is the handheld echocardiography, is a Doppler device, and it's used to just assess the stenosis and now diagnose it. This is an anatomical photo that shows what the normal aortic valve would look like and how the aortic valve of someone that has stenosis would look like. So this is how it would look if it's open, and this is how it would look during the case of stenosis. So as you guys can see, it cannot properly open and it cannot properly close. It's characterized by rigidity and very, very narrow space for the blood to circulate. So when putting that knowledge in mind, it's a very narrow space for the blood to be circulated all over the body. So the presentation, the clinical scenario that you can imagine is someone presenting with dyspnea upon exertion and rapid breath and feeling of angina, basically. And this is how it looks when it's closed. So it's just an overall narrowing and rigidity all over the stenosis valve. And obviously this will affect the systemic vasculature, since this is also increasing the pressure on the ventricle. So there's a lot of pressure on the left ventricle. This will eventually lead to left ventricular hypertrophy. Another way or another formula that is currently being used to check the prognosis of the aortic stenosis patients is this formula, which says P max equals 4V2 squared max. In my review article, beyond the scope of the reviews of the article, but this was very interesting because just using this formula, you can actually be able to determine whether this is mild, moderate, or severe. It's basically done by just checking the velocity. So just if the speed is less than 2.5, this is hence diagnosed as aortic sclerosis rather than aortic stenosis. The difference between aortic sclerosis and stenosis is that in a patient with aortic sclerosis, there's still the calcification and narrowing, but the only difference here is that it does not affect the heart at all. In stenosis, it starts affecting the heart. If it's more than that, then it's divided into either mild, moderate, or severe, severe being more than 4 ms. Alright, so the current guidelines for aortic stenosis. We have the evaluation of aortic regurgitation, and sometimes the presentation is a mixed presentation of aortic stenosis and regurgitation. Aortic regurgitation is basically when there's a leak of the blood back into the body again, and sometimes they present with both, and this will eventually affect the aorta as well. In asymptomatic patients, it's usually suggested that they just keep on with the follow-up and possibly doing their investigations. Recent studies, which is a paper that I reviewed a few days ago before presenting, is that even in asymptomatic cases, sometimes earlier intervention is associated with better prognosis. Of course, this is something that requires further studies. And then the strongest indication is the presence of symptoms, and this is called the exercise testing, in which there's the left ventricular ejection fraction being more than 50 mm. Now, in patients with a dilated aorta takes place when there's so much pressure and it cannot be distributed properly over the body, so the body compensates by dilating itself, which obviously carries a completely huge range of comorbidities, mortalities, and complications. Aortic valve repair and valve sparing surgery can sometimes be used instead of doing the direct replacement of the aortic valve. There's also a new intervention which is titled as transcatheter aortic valve replacement. This is done for people that are not suitable for surgery, either due to age or presence of comorbidities as well. I have also done a study on mechanical complications of TAVR with Dr. Mazen in the physiology department. And this is something that can be probably discussed in the future. So right now? Yes. Excuse me, 2 minutes left. Okay, we're almost done. So what are the scenarios or the clinical scenarios that will require further interpretation? The first one is hypertension. So as you can imagine, hypertension is a very increased pressure all over the body. So imagining someone with a stenosis valve and hypertension, this means that a completely different risk factor should be assessed an intervention with bicuspid, which is the congenital aortic valve. Patients with bicuspid aortic valve will eventually have an aortic root disease due to the pressure that is happening in the aorta. And then we have the combined stenosis and regurgitation, in which there's a dual presentation of aortic stenosis and aortic regurgitation. Presentation of aortic stenosis and aortic regurgitation. Further studies are needed to implement what interventions can probably be made to increase the prognosis of these conditions. Lastly, we have diabetes, and diabetes is one of the most comorbid conditions and very well known all over the world. So we need to just link things together. Keeping in mind rheumatic heart disease needs to also be studied more, as it's still happening in the developing countries. So the takeaway of this message is what aortic stenosis is, the recent guidelines in the clinical presentation. I'll gladly answer the questions once everyone else presents.
Thank you, Dr. Leon, for this informative and very rich session. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Mr. Speaker, Dr. Ahmed Yamal, topic, what is NBS challenge? Real hazard to drug sustained abuse in Sudan and the recommendations to assist fighting against these others.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. تحية للسيد كوميتي المؤتمر ده وتهنئة لنبتة هذا المؤتمر الأول. تحية خاصة لأستاذي المرتفعات وعائشة. I'm very happy to see many of my students and colleagues here in this room, and I'm very pleased. First of all, I would like to thank the
organizing committee for inviting me to talk on this maybe very important issue that is of concern to talk on this maybe very important issue that is of concern to the community as well as to the judicial and to the forensic arena in Sudan and worldwide. My presentation is focused on first the awareness and knowledge and attitude towards the challenges of MPS. So I think most of you know what MPS are. Are you? You know what MPS. So I will not take a long time in the definition. However, I would like to thank also my co-author, Dr. Ahmad. This is a very long study. I'm trying here just to concentrate on the concepts. So, usually this problem is concerned with the severity control of drug abuse. And specifically in some countries where there's a problem of the identification and analysis sometimes of drugs of abuse. And we go to what legislators do no harm, so try to understand or just not do anything that can harm the patient more than providing. Just not do anything that can harm the patient more than providing assistance. So from here comes the need for the awareness of the danger and risk of the MPS. The problem is associated with one of the very important phenomena worldwide. This is called organized crimes, or which links with human trafficking. So the first human trafficking. So the first who published this was Alex Haley, if you remember, the TV series Roots that addressed the issue of slavery. Slavery is part of all these crimes, as well as drug abuse and money laundering and arms trafficking, etc. Anyhow, the MPS is the concept of the MPS is to find molecules with structures that cannot be detected by the conventional method of analysis, consequently creating a forensic challenge. And the second thing is that they are not included in the lists of substances in the Act. The law, for example, of narcotics and psychotropics of Sudan, 1994, will identify specifically the substances that can be usually send the person to legal procedures. They must be explicitly included in the list. So by trying to either change slightly the molecule, you will end up with a molecule which is different in structure, but may be very similar in function to the traditional drugs. The second thing is that the concept of the MPS is to vary in function to the traditional drugs. The second thing is that the concept of the MPS is to bring some substances which were used for industrial or in other indications to be abused, like what happened with the with the fast salt known as methylbromide, which is used in the industry as a cleaning substance, but unfortunately it has been recently used as one of the NPS with very aggressive behavior associated with its abuse. The chemical structure is the most important thing in these drugs. And since 2004, actually, the international control of narcotics and psychotropic substances started by 1961, the single convention which controls the substances included in the yellow list, which are called narcotics. This was amended by 1972 protocol, and in 1971, the Convention Against the Abuse of Psychotropics scheduled some substances in what we call the green list. Actually, in 1988, the problem of the precursors substances usually used in the illicit and clandestine manufacturing of narcotic substances, usually used in the illicit and clandestine manufacturing of narcotics and psychotropic substances were put under control, international one, and even national control under the name the red list. However, that was the picture of how substances can be added either to one of these three lists of thousands of substances. That created a problem even to the CME list for legislative and medical measures to be in line and compliant with these recommendations. So there are some opioids, fentanyl derivatives, synthetic cannabinoids, and here is very important because they started to become available in the market. The dissociatives like DCP, benzylidine, and the classical hallucinogenics like 25C and LSD derivatives, and the sedatives, hypnotics, and the stimulants like casino derivatives, and as I have given example with methadone. The problem in Sudan here, this is one of the clandestine laboratories which have been dismantled here in Sudan. This is a very serious problem. And the risks towards the public health starts from the lack of international protocols to be followed as guidelines for the control of the intoxication with these substances. And the second thing is the lack of the proper and sufficient information that can be used in the awareness for the public to avoid the use of these substances. In fact, these substances have found very strong concern because the effect is not similar to the traditional ones. They exceed in their effect the traditional drugs, and if we give example by only one of these, the cannabis sativa, from which the traditional drug, which is highly abused in Sudan, bamboo. This is a traditional one. And all of you know that bamboo or cannabis or whatever preparations, if it is hashish or marijuana or well. And all of you know that bamboo or cannabis or whatever preparations, if it is hashish or marijuana or whatever, they act by stimulating the cannabinoid receptors. Actually, what happens here is that the synthetic cannabinoids are not similar in structure to cannabis, even tetrahydrocannabinol or cannabidiol or cannabinol, They are different structures, but they aggressively cannabinol or cannabidiol or cannabinol. They are different structures, but they aggressively stimulate the receptors, leading to effect 100 times as effective as the bulb.
2 minutes per hand.
No?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I try to finish in 3 minutes. في مشكلة. Anyhow, let us very quickly look at some substances that can be included in the list like tramadol. Anybody knows tramadol is a very good remedy as narcotic analgesic, which replaces morphine and heroin and other narcotic analgesics that are controlled, and tramadol is available to some extent. Now, the abuse of tramadol exceeded the medical use. And the clandestine laboratories started to manufacture millions of tablets which are usually abused by young adults in Sudan. One of the drugs also which found attention in the Sudanese community was called Kharsha. This is our trihexyphenidyl, which is known as the trade name of Akizole. Also, this is regarded as MPS because the drug which is used for adjuvant to Parkinsonism therapy is then highly abused 100 times as the therapeutic use in Sudan. This is one of the features of the MPS they use in other indications. We have here in Sudan also one of the problems, which is amphetamine type stimulants, ATS, amphetamine type stimulants. And very quickly, I'm going to just mention one of these amphetamine type stimulants which created a problem in Sudan, which is called the methamphetamine. This is crystalness or ice or whatever you can say, and we consider this one of the most dangerous new psychoactive substances in Sudan. Now, I'm not going to the recommendations and lots of details in the presentation, but I would like to say that there are both. There are both in sports, there are both in the arts, there are both in different activities that can deviate the young adults from the abuse of these substances. Tramadol is not very well known in Sudan until it has spread among the young adults. This is tramadol research, and thank you for listening. Thank you.
شكرا دكتور احمد الطرح الجميل ونسال الله ان يكفينا شرور هذه المصائب. Our last speaker, Dr. Hassan Ismail Osman, ساعة تدريس في برنامج الطب، ولدينا حسن هم وكيل ثمرات كلية نبتة. حدثنا حسن Elias in Wonderland syndrome.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We will be discussing Alice in Wonderland syndrome. The reason why I'm here is not because of the paper being illustrated, but because of the findings of a paper that has yet to be published. In the paper we have not yet published, we found rather staggering and, quite honestly, shocking results. We found that almost none of the professionals currently dealing with patients, psychiatric patients, have an idea of what AIWS is. In our recommendations, we made it crystal clear that presentations such as this are a must recommendation. Presentation. Now, as far as we know, the very first description of Alice in Wonderland syndrome was written down by Professor C.W. Lippmann in 1952. But the term came to be through the works of Professor John Todd of the United Kingdom. Professor Todd actually contributed so much to our understanding of AWS that it is Todd syndrome. Lewis Carroll, who wrote Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, probably suffered from the syndrome himself. How does that mean? It is highly possible that it was as a result of HPD, which we will be discussing in a few moments. But it is a theory, and we wish not to accuse anyone of anything. Now, most of you are probably familiar with AIWS, most of you are probably familiar with Alice in Wonderland, the story, the novel, the multi-award winning novel. In the novel, Alice experiences hallucinations quite clearly. She experiences hallucinations related to vision, in which she faces issues determining the sizes of things as well as the distance between her and said objects. Now, plethora of objects can manifest AIWS, so we move on. We just have to give time constraints. And before we move on, there's a point I want to make crystal clear. And that is that we, as the junior faculty members, and myself specifically as a junior faculty member in the Department of Psychiatry, I'm very humbled to be speaking about anything regarding psychology or psychiatry in the presence of our college's rector. The man is a legend. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. Now, we'll try to save on time. These are a few figures who truly work to see to it that AIWS is known to the public, that AIWS is known to professionals. Some of them have passed away, others are alive. The very first three are Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland back in the 1800s. He was a professor at Oxford. Professor J. Todd and Professor C.W. Lippmann, who we just spoke about. Professor J.P. Brown of Leiden University, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us today due to certain arrangements. But Professor Blum was probably the very first psychiatrist to write a medical book on AIWS, and I think that's amazing. Professor Ivy Summer did not specifically write on Alice in Wonderland syndrome, but she wrote a plethora of papers and a plethora of books on hallucinations and on schizophrenia. What is Alice in Wonderland syndrome? Well, as I said, it's a visual hallucination characterized by 4 visual disturbances: micropsia, micropsia, bilopsia, and telopsia, which are all defined here. Bilopsia and telopsia, which are all defined here, as well as 4 sensations: the sense of passage of time, as well as 4 sensations: the sense of passage of time, the zooming of the environment, distortion of body image, and issues regarding shapes of objects, metamorphosis. What causes AIWS? Well, a number of infections could, a number of CNS and VNS lesions could, paroxysmal neurological disorders, psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia, medication substances which match together every once in a while, HBPD, as I previously mentioned, as well as a number of miscellaneous causes that scientists were not able to categorize. Roughly speaking, there is no duration-related criteria to the diagnosis of AIWS. However, AIWS usually ranges from minutes to days, not much longer. With that being said, there are and have been reported for years on end, and quite frankly, sometimes for life. That's been all. Thank you all for your time. This has been.
شكرا دكتور حسن. الآن المجال مفتوح للأسئلة والتعليقات.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. دكتور مساء في الديبارتمنت. My question from Dr. Milena والحقيقة المسألة يعني أنا لي عظيم الشرف إن أنا أكون من الناس اللي درستها بالجامعة بلاد الحاليين والمستقبلين. Regarding your papers, what about the ejection fraction? Is there a difference between the ejection fraction of aortic stenosis and ischemic heart disease? If there is a difference, can we use these differences for special diagnosis for between ischemic heart disease and aortic stenosis from the ejection fraction test? This is my second question.
Pharmacist and biotechnician. Asking first, is it applicable to do bioinformatic approaches here in Sudan during the challenges that we don't have access to go to different softwares and work with applications and software? Thank you.
Is there another question? إذا ما في سؤال الآن نتفضل دكتور مينا يكون المايك عشان تجاوب. عندك سؤال؟
Sorry for intervention as a discussor, not a presenter, for Dr. Idris. When we are going to design a vaccine for any drugs or any medication, we have to estimate the population coverage and how we can to estimate the population coverage and how we can to estimate the population coverage and how it can be applicable.
تفضل دكتور زينب.
So it's effect of the condition. Further questions, I think I would like to refer to a cardiologist to further interpret this question in more details. Again, to the level of my knowledge, it's a powerful indicator, and for ischemic valvular condition, it's usually less than 40. Thank you.
زي ما انا هجاوب على السؤال ذكره انه في اي ليميتيشن او ادابتيشن في انه اسمها فاكسين في السودان عموما. هي صراحه في حاجات كانت كثيره منها ان سوفت ويرز كثيره مشهور يعني المفروض السودان ما شغاله حتى بعد رفع الحظر ما شغاله. وفي سوفت ويرز كثيره برضه ركزنا فيها انا قبل ما ابدا اشتغل في ماركت في نبتة انها هي هاي كوست. وصراحه هنا بروفيسور زبير ومبررين اي رخصه عن كل سوفت ويرز كان عنده استعداد تام رخصه عن كل سوفت ويرز كان عنده استعداد تام انه هي $1000 انه يدفعها باسم الكليه ونشتغل وان شاء الله يكون عندنا هو الشمال شغالين فيه هسه الدكتورة سارة المحتسبة وإن شاء الله نستفيد الموضوع يكون متطور أكثر. بالنسبة للسؤال الثاني هو كان population coverage. population coverage بشتغلها برضه في اللاين سوفت وير اللي هو الاي اي بي بي الاميونو ايبيتوب داتابيس ممكن نطلع منها population coverage. لكن عشان انا الفكره حقتي كانت هيوج شغاله في كونستراكت اير فاكسينز فبالنسبه لي كان يعني البروجكت كمان الشغل كونستراكت اير فاكسينز فبالنسبه لي كان يعني البروجكت كمان الشغل كثير شديد. هي ما حاجه يعني في الفاينل ممكن تكتبها كلكم كثير شديد. هي ما حاجه يعني في الفاينل ممكن تكتبها كريكومنديشن او ورقه ثانيه ممكن اشتغلها كامله انها بس تكون فيها البوزيشن كفرنج. شغلها يعني ما اقدر اقول سهل لكنه اونلاين سوفت وير الاي اي بي بي اي ريكومند لو ان شاء الله في الورقه الجايه من الاشمينيا اوريدي انا اشتغلت في البوزيشن كفرنج في المؤتمر الجاي ان شاء الله هتشوفوها وتشوفوا نبتة اللي هي الفاكسين نانو فاكسين. وقبل ما انهي كلامي جاوبت على الاسئله اسمح لي برضه اسالها. دايركت الدكتوره ناهد عثمان صراحه يعني انا